Let's begin. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Sky High Stories. The mansion gleamed like a winter wonderland, its towering windows casting golden reflections across the freshly fallen snow. Inside, crystal chandeliers sparkled above polished marble floors, and the air was filled with the delicate strains of a string quartet. The scent of pine mingled with the rich aroma of roasted chestnuts and warm mulled wine, creating a festive atmosphere that could charm even the most cynical guest. Tonight was Richard's annual Christmas party, a lavish event that attracted the city's elite, and he moved through the crowd with calculated charm, greeting socialites and business partners alike. Every smile he offered, every hand he shook, carried an undercurrent of subtle power, a reminder that he was the man who controlled not just wealth, but influence itself. Veronica, radiant in a deep emerald gown that clung to her like liquid silk, followed closely behind him. She laughed lightly at his jokes, her confidence a dazzling contrast to Elena, who lingered at the periphery of the gathering, her elegant red dress understated in comparison. The baby bump that defined her pregnancy was hard to miss, yet she tried to blend in, sip her champagne discreetly, and enjoy the evening without drawing attention. But attention had a way of finding her, especially when Richard's eyes lingered more on Veronica than on her. Guests, caught up in the glamour and glitter, seemed oblivious to the quiet storm brewing between the three of them. Richard leaned close to Veronica, whispering words that drew her into his orbit, while Elena's hands clenched subtly around her glass. Despite the pangs of betrayal, there was a steely determination in her eyes, a quiet reminder that she was not a woman to be easily dismissed. Then, the moment came that Elena had dreaded. Richard raised a toast to the crowd, praising Veronica's charm and brilliance, deliberately overlooking Elena in front of everyone. Laughter and applause followed, but for Elena, it was a sting of humiliation, sharp and undeniable. She held her head high, refusing to let the world see her breaking. Richard, oblivious to her silent resolve, stood beside Veronica, a smug smile on his face, believing he had once again asserted dominance. But beneath Elena's composed exterior, a quiet fire began to burn, a promise that this was far from over. Sunlight filtered through the heavy drapes, casting a soft glow across Elena's bedroom. The air was silent except for the faint ticking of an ornate clock. She lay in the bed alone, the sheets cold around her, and stared at the ceiling. Last night's glittering party felt like a distant dream, a cruel illusion that had masked the reality of her life. Richard's laughter, Veronica's sparkling presence, the clinking glasses, all of it replayed in her mind with sharp clarity, each memory a reminder of the public humiliation she had endured. The creak of the front door announced Richard's departure. He gave her a perfunctory smile, muttered something about an urgent business meeting, and left. Elena knew better. His steps on the marble floor had none of the warmth they once carried. They were calculated, distant, intentionally avoiding the tender space she still occupied in his life. The betrayal wasn't just in his actions, it was in the cold detachment, the certainty that he had chosen someone else over the woman who had stood by him for years. As she rose, her hand unconsciously resting on her baby bump, flashes of their past relationship filled her mind. She remembered the days when Richard had been attentive, when their laughter had filled this very house, when love had seemed infinite. She remembered their first Christmas together, how he had held her hands and promised that nothing could ever come between them. And she remembered the slow erosion of trust, the subtle manipulations, the silent nights where she had cried alone while he pursued his desires without remorse. Love had once been warm, now it had turned cold and brittle, leaving her heart raw but not defeated. Determined, Elena moved quietly through the bedroom, packing essentials into a small suitcase. She chose items carefully, a few sets of clothing, important documents, and her most cherished mementos. Every movement was deliberate, a quiet assertion of control over a life Richard thought he could dominate. Her heart ached with betrayal, but beneath the pain, a flame of resolve burned steadily. She would protect herself and the child growing inside her, no matter the cost. Then her phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen: "Your future is waiting, and you cannot ignore it." She stared at the words, a shiver running down her spine. Who could have sent it? And what future were they speaking of? Elena's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. The first step had been taken, and she felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation, as if destiny itself were nudging her toward a path she was ready to walk. Elena sat at the sleek, polished desk in the quiet study, the glow of her laptop illuminating her determined face. The room, once filled with the weight of Richard's dominance, now felt like a battlefield where she could reclaim control, brick by brick. Carefully, she began transferring funds from Richard's accounts into one of her own, accounts he had never suspected she could access. Every keystroke was deliberate, precise, a silent act of defiance against the man who had humiliated her only days before. She wasn't just protecting herself, she was quietly reclaiming the power and security that had always been hers, hidden beneath the layers of wealth and control he had so arrogantly flaunted. Maya, Elena's loyal assistant and confidant, appeared beside her, carrying a tray of coffee. Her sharp eyes scanned the screen with approval, offering quiet guidance. "This way," Maya whispered, pointing to the carefully crafted spreadsheet. "You're reclaiming everything he thought he owned. And he won't even notice until it's too late." Elena smiled faintly, grateful for Maya's unwavering support. In a world where deception ran rampant, she had found one ally she could trust completely. Together, they navigated the financial labyrinth, plotting each step of Elena's meticulous plan. As she worked, Elena reflected on the life she had once believed she shared with Richard. She remembered the nights spent planning their future, the whispered dreams of family and security. That dream had been shattered, but in its place, a new vision had begun to take shape, one of independence, dignity, and control over her own destiny. Each transaction, each document she organized, was a small step toward that future. Meanwhile, Richard remained oblivious, lost in the whirlwind of his affair with Veronica. He laughed and charmed his way through social obligations, unaware that Elena was quietly dismantling the foundation of their shared life. The dramatic irony weighed on her, a bittersweet satisfaction that the man who had thought himself untouchable had no idea that his empire of control was subtly slipping through his fingers. Finally, with her tasks complete for the day, Elena closed her laptop and stood, taking a deep breath. She packed a small clutch and adjusted her coat. With Maya at her side, she walked confidently out the front door, her expression serene. "I'll be back before the evening gala," she said softly, masking the truth beneath a polite smile. Under the guise of attending a Christmas charity event, Elena stepped into the cold winter air, leaving the mansion behind, for now, carrying not just her belongings, but the promise of a future she would build on her own terms. Several months had passed since Elena quietly walked away from the mansion, and the months had been transformative. She had built a life of independence, navigating her finances with confidence and reclaiming her sense of self. Emotional resilience had become her armor. The betrayal that once cut so deeply now fueled her determination. Clutching the small hand of her young son, Leo, she walked through the twinkling aisles of a cozy Christmas market. The scent of roasted almonds and cinnamon filled the air, mingling with laughter and carols. Snowflakes drifted lazily, adding a soft magic to the evening. For the first time in months, Elena felt a sense of peace, a quiet joy in the simplicity of the moment. Unbeknownst to her, Richard and Veronica had chosen the same market for an impromptu holiday outing. Richard, still charming and self-absorbed, moved through the stalls with Veronica, his arm draped possessively around her waist. They were laughing, oblivious to the lives they had disrupted, when Richard's gaze fell on a small boy standing near a wooden toy stall. The child had strikingly familiar eyes, an uncanny mirror of his own. Richard froze, a sudden chill running down his spine. The realization that this boy could be his own son hit him like a thunderclap. His heart raced, a mixture of disbelief, awe, and fear taking hold. Leo, oblivious to the storm he had unleashed, tugged gently at Elena's hand and chirped, "Mom, can we get the gingerbread?" The word mom hung in the air, and Richard's mind went numb. He blinked rapidly, trying to reconcile the boy in front of him with the son he had never known. The crowd around them faded into background blur. All he could see was the boy, so small, yet carrying a piece of him in those wide, expressive eyes. Veronica noticed the sudden change in his demeanor, but before she could speak, Richard's attention was fully captured by Elena and Leo. His mind raced, a torrent of thoughts colliding. Could this child really be mine? Did Elena do this without telling me? The questions swirled, leaving him frozen, caught between shock and the stirring of emotions he had long suppressed. In that snowy, bustling Christmas market, fate had orchestrated a reunion that neither he nor Elena had anticipated, a reunion that would change everything. Richard's steps were purposeful as he approached Elena and Leo, his polished shoes crunching against the snowy cobblestones of the market. At first, he wore the familiar mask of charm, offering a practiced smile meant to disarm and dominate. "Elena," he said smoothly, his voice low and confident, "it's been a long time. Quite the surprise to see you here, with him." His eyes flicked briefly to Leo, attempting to gauge the child, but his expression betrayed only superficial interest. Elena's gaze met his without wavering. She straightened, placing a protective hand on Leo's shoulder. Calm and authoritative, she replied, "Yes, Richard. Life has a way of bringing unexpected moments, doesn't it?" There was no warmth in her tone, only quiet confidence. She had spent months strengthening herself, learning that power was not always in forceful words but in composed presence. Veronica, sensing the shift in attention, stiffened beside Richard. Her smile faltered, a flash of jealousy crossing her features. "Richard, what is she doing here?" she asked, her voice tight, forcing laughter that did not reach her eyes. She moved closer, positioning herself between him and Elena, but the invisible thread of tension was already pulling their confrontation into the public eye. Leo, unaware of the complicated emotions swirling around him, tugged gently at Richard's sleeve. "Hi, Dad," he said innocently, his words hanging in the air like a spark in dry tinder. Richard froze, the child's voice cutting through layers of denial and disbelief. His mind spun, a storm of emotions breaking through the icy surface of his composure. "Dad? Could it be?" Elena's calm smile never wavered, but inside she felt the weight of the moment, the culmination of months of strategy and quiet endurance. Richard's face drained of color, shock and emerging guilt battling with his ego. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Veronica reacted defensively, her hand on his arm, whispering heatedly, "He's just a child, don't let her manipulate you." But the truth was undeniable, staring Richard straight in the eyes. Leo's words, innocent and unfiltered, carried a revelation that could not be dismissed. The bustling Christmas market faded into a blur around them. The snow, the lights, the laughter of strangers, all of it became background to the charged moment between a man, a woman, and a boy who held pieces of both in his small hands. For the first time, Richard felt the full weight of his choices. The betrayal, the lies, the mistress, none of it mattered in comparison to the reality before him. Elena stood firm, a silent force of dignity and authority, while his world shifted in ways he could neither control nor predict. Richard followed Elena and Leo to a quiet corner of the Christmas market, away from the curious eyes of the bustling crowd. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words, tension crackling like static. Elena turned to him, her expression calm, yet resolute, and spoke in a steady voice that left no room for misinterpretation. "Richard, Leo is your son. Every moment you've missed, every choice you've made, he has felt the absence of a father, but I've made sure he is loved and protected." Her words hit him like a cold wave, leaving Richard stunned. He blinked rapidly, trying to process the revelation, while fragments of their shared past flitted through his mind. He remembered the nights they had stayed awake talking about dreams of family, the Christmas when Elena had laughed in his arms, promising they would always care for each other. He remembered the signs he had ignored, the subtle clues of a pregnancy, the way Elena's body and spirit had quietly shifted, a private universe he had failed to notice. Shame, denial, and longing collided within him, creating a storm that left him momentarily paralyzed. He wanted to reach out, to grasp at the boy who looked so much like him, yet fear and guilt held him back. "How did I let it come to this?" he thought. Every choice he had made, every indulgence in his arrogance, now weighed heavily on his conscience. Veronica, unwilling to be sidelined, stepped forward, her voice dripping with tension and defensiveness. "Richard, maybe she's lying. Maybe she's manipulating you," she insisted, her hand gripping his arm tightly. But Elena remained composed, her authority unshaken. She met Veronica's gaze steadily and said, "The truth doesn't need to be proven to the unwilling." Her calm certainty cut through the chaos like a blade, leaving no room for doubt. Richard finally lowered his gaze to Leo, who clutched his mother's hand with innocent trust. The boy's eyes, so strikingly familiar, reflected the bond that had existed long before Richard had recognized it. For the first time, he understood the full weight of his underestimation. Elena had protected, nurtured, and quietly outmaneuvered him. Every moment he had wasted on selfish pursuits had led to this, an undeniable reckoning that his arrogance could not undo. In the icy glow of the Christmas lights, Richard felt the profound consequences of his actions. Elena's quiet strength, the child he had ignored, and the life he had overlooked crystallized into a truth he could no longer evade. The game of control he thought he had mastered had shifted irrevocably, and for the first time, he understood the magnitude of the woman he had betrayed. Richard approached Elena cautiously, his usual confidence replaced by an unfamiliar vulnerability. The bustling Christmas market seemed to fade around them as he took a tentative step closer, his eyes searching hers for forgiveness that he didn't deserve. "Elena," I was wrong, he began, his voice unsteady. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. I never meant to hurt you, or Leo. I want to make it right. His hands, usually so commanding, hung awkwardly at his sides, betraying the depth of his regret. Elena regarded him silently, her mind weighing each word, each gesture. Forgiveness was tempting, but it came with conditions. Could she co-parent with a man who had abandoned them emotionally? Could she trust him not to repeat his betrayals? Or was walking away, the path she had been quietly building for months, the choice that would preserve her dignity and her child's well-being? She breathed deeply, letting the cold winter air steady her thoughts. Richard, she said finally, her tone measured and calm, I appreciate your words. But apologies alone don't fix years of neglect. Actions do. And Leo's happiness comes first. If you truly want to be part of our lives, you'll need to prove that you've changed, not just say it. Snow began to fall gently, dusting the market in a delicate white blanket. It was a quiet, symbolic cleansing, a visual metaphor for rebirth and clarity. Richard watched as Elena knelt to adjust Leo's scarf, the child giggling softly, unaware of the tension around him. The scene struck Richard profoundly. He began to see, perhaps for the first time, the consequences of his arrogance and selfishness. The woman he had underestimated was not only wise but fiercely resilient, capable of protecting what mattered most. Veronica, standing a few steps away, glared at the trio. Her carefully orchestrated plans to claim Richard's full attention were unraveling as she realized that his focus had shifted. Elena's quiet authority, combined with the bond between mother and child, left Veronica exposed, powerless to manipulate the situation any further. Richard's gaze lingered on Elena, a mixture of longing and regret in his eyes. The moment was raw and unflinching, a crossroads where choices, consequences, and true character converged in the falling snow. Redemption might be possible, but only if he faced the truth he had long avoided, and only if Elena allowed him to walk the path she had already begun. The soft glow of twinkling lights filled Elena's new living room, casting warmth across the walls of a space that felt entirely her own. The Christmas tree sparkled in the corner, adorned with ornaments she and Leo had chosen together, each one a small testament to their journey. The scent of pine mingled with freshly baked cookies, and a fire crackled merrily in the hearth. It was quiet, intimate, and profoundly comforting, everything her old life had lacked. Leo giggled as he placed a small wooden star atop the tree, and Elena lifted him into her arms, smoothing the edges of his coat. The boy's eyes, bright and curious, sparkled in the firelight, and Elena felt a swell of pride and contentment. She had survived betrayal, reclaimed her independence, and now built a home that reflected her strength. Here, she and Leo were safe. Here, they were free. Outside, Richard lingered on the edge of the snow-covered driveway, his breath visible in the cold night air. He watched from a distance, the image of Elena holding Leo etched into his mind. The boy, with eyes so unmistakably his own, looked up at Elena and whispered, "Mom, can we open our presents now?" Richard's heart tightened at the words, knowing he had lost moments he could never reclaim. The humility he felt was sharp, painful, and deeply deserved. His selfish choices had cost him a family, a connection, and a chance at true love. Veronica had long since disappeared from his thoughts, her schemes irrelevant in the shadow of what he had truly lost. He realized that no amount of charm or wealth could replace the warmth of a home built on trust, love, and resilience. Elena looked down at Leo, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead, and smiled softly. The world outside was cold and silent, yet inside, there was light, laughter, and love. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, covering footprints in a pristine white blanket, a quiet symbol of endings and new beginnings, erasing the past but leaving traces of growth and perseverance. Richard took a hesitant step back, the weight of regret settling in his chest. He had witnessed the quiet power of a woman who had refused to be broken, and for the first time, he understood, some gifts, like love, independence, and dignity, could not be bought, they had to be earned, nurtured, and protected. Elena and Leo's laughter carried through the crisp night air, a reminder that life had moved on, and some chapters, though painful, could lead to the most beautiful beginnings. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Sky High Stories.